We've been talking about the heart and how important it is to keep our heart healthy. When we talked about nutrition, we learned that there are foods that are not good for our heart, such as foods that are high certain types of fats like saturated fats and trans fats. In addition to avoiding certain foods, it is important that we keep our heart healthy by exercising it every day. Even though we can't see our heart, it is a muscle. Like any muscle, we need to exercise it to keep it healthy and strong.
When we do things like running and jumping, we are exercising our heart. It is easy to tell that your heart is getting a good workout when you are moving so much that you start to breathe harder and faster than normal. But the best way to know for sure just how much exercise your heart is getting is to check your heart rate. In other words, counting how many times in 1 minute that your heart moves or pumps. There are a few ways you can find out what your heart rate is. Sometimes, if you put your hand over your heart, you can actually feel it beating just on the other side of your skin and bones. As we learned, the heart is a pump. It circulates oxygen-rich blood to all parts of our body. There are certain places on your body that you can actually feel the blood as it swishes through your arteries. Here's a quick little video that explains some of these places. You can see if you can find your pulse while you watch the video. Go ahead and try to find your own pulse.
There are multiple places on the body where you can take a pulse. The easiest are the radial, which is the inside of the wrist, and the carotid, which is the side of the neck. To take a pulse, you're going to want to use your middle and index fingers. Do not use your thumb. Your thumb actually has a pulse and can interfere with your ability to count the pulse in those places. So on your wrist, you're going to place your fingers lightly on the inside part of your wrist and move them around until you'll feel that pulsing sensation under your fingers. For your carotid, again, the side of your neck, it should be either side of your throat, and you'll feel that pulsing sensation when you get it in the right place. You can count for 60 seconds, probably best to use a clock, and that's how you'll get your heart rate. If you can't find your pulse, don't worry. If you're able to look for it, you definitely have one.
Just as the nurse said in the video, don't worry if you can't find it right now. If you are alive, you have a pulse. In just a few minutes, we're going to go outside for two fun activities. One activity will be to see what happens when we exercise. Does our heart rate go up or does it go down? Since we have been studying the heart, our second activity is a fun little relay race challenge to see who can put a heart puzzle together faster today, the boys or the girls. As you are watching this video, I'm watching to see who will do the puzzle first and who will do the running relay to get their heart rate up first. I have set out some cones for the running relay. The purpose of this activity is to see if our heart rate goes up when we exercise our hearts. The team that goes first, either boys or girls, will see how many times they can take a deck ring from one set of cones to the other in a 5-minute period. I will have a helper from each team that will be the timer, counter, and recorder. Your team will line up with one half of your team behind one set of cones and the other half of your team behind the other set of cones. When I say go, the timer will start the clock. The first person in line will take off towards the other line carrying the deck ring. The person across the way must wait for the deck ring from behind the set of cones. If they step in front of the cones before the deck ring arrives, they may be asked to sit out of the next activity because stepping in front of the cones before you have the ring is against the rules of this challenge. When the deck ring makes it across the grass to the other line, the counter will shout out, 1. If you're the person who ran the deck ring and handed it to the first person in line, you will then simply go to the back of that line and wait your next turn to run the deck ring back to the line where you first started. When you run it back to the line where you started, you go to the back of that line and wait your turn to run it across the grass again. The team is welcome to shout out the number of handoffs every time the ring travels from one side to the other. At the end of 5 minutes, the timer will shout out, stop, and record the number of times that the ring made it from one line to the other. The team that has the most handoffs in 5 minutes wins. Immediately after the 5-minute period, the counter will clear the stopwatch. Your team should quickly take a seat on the sidewalk outside of Ms. Stallman's store and try to find their pulse. Remember, you can find it on your wrist or on your neck. The timer will tell your team to get ready, and when they say go, you should start counting the number of times that you feel your heart beating. After 1 minute, the timer will shout, stop. The number that you get is your heart rate after exercise. Your timer recorder will walk down the line of your team members who are sitting on the sidewalk and ask what their heart rate was after exercise. She'll record the number of times your heart beat in 1 minute on her paper under the column beats per minute after exercise. You must wait sitting on the sidewalk for the other team to finish the heart puzzle before you are called over for your team to take their turn. If you can't wait nicely on the sidewalk after you take your pulse, you will remain there while your team does the puzzle. If you are on the team that is going to do the puzzle first, you will line up behind the cones. Just like as is the case with the deck ring relay race, you can't go out in front of the cones until your teammate gets there. When the starter says go, the first person can take off, and the timer will start the clock. The object of the game is to put the puzzle together in a shorter time than the other team. Instead of handing you a deck ring, your teammate will tag your hand when they get to you. You must keep both feet behind the cones until your teammate gets there. The team member at the front of the line will run down to the sidewalk area and grab one puzzle piece. They will run with that piece over to the area where the blank puzzle mat is located. They will need to carefully place their puzzle piece on the puzzle, then run back to the line and tag the next person who is waiting behind the cones at the front of the line. Once you tag the person in the front of the line, you must go to the back of the line to wait for your turn to get another puzzle piece. As you start to build the puzzle, make sure to keep it neat and organized. The race will not end until the puzzle is covering the mat so that none of the words or pictures under the puzzle pieces can be seen. Once the last piece of the puzzle has been properly placed, the timer will stop the clock and write down your time. When both teams have completed their first challenge, you switch areas and challenges. Okay, before we go outside, let's quickly review what we're going to do. One team will be participating in a challenge to see how many times it can take a deck ring back and forth across the grassy area in a 5-minute period. You must wait with your feet behind the cones before you can take the ring. After you hand the ring off, go to the back of the line and wait for your next turn. If the ring drops at any time, just pick it up and continue. You may not throw the ring, you must hand it to your teammate. At the end of the 5-minute period, your team must immediately report to the sidewalk and take a seat. You only have a minute or two to find your pulse. When the timer tells you to start counting, you will need to count the number of times your heart beats in 1 minute. Focus on your own pulse. If you let others distract you, that is your choice. However, if you lose track, you will not get an accurate assessment of what your heart rate will be. When the minute is up, the timer will go down the row asking you what your active heart rate was so that they can record the information. In the other challenge, your team will be timed while they take turns adding pieces to the heart puzzle, one piece at a time. Once again, you must wait behind the line until you are tagged by your teammate. You can only take one puzzle piece at a time, and your team must have all of the pieces in place before the timer will stop the clock and record your time. If you choose to be silly or disruptive when we go outside, it is an automatic step 2. If you need to be talked to a second time, you will be asked to sit by the wall until we go back into class, and you will have an automatic lunch detention.